So let me now introduce the main sponsor, DESMI, and their Managing Director, CEO, Rasmus Folsø. Please stand up there.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to DSMI Shipping Meeting 2022, also from DESMI. We are very happy to be main sponsor of this event. We have in DESMI quite a history with the DSMI Shipping Meet and also with the DSMI ship owners. And we always appreciate coming to this exhibition. There is something special about this event, and I think it's amazing that an event of this size in shipping can be pulled off at a small island like DSMI. And when you are here as an exhibitor or a visitor, you always feel that the whole community here in DSMI is really supporting this event. Everybody wants this to be a success, and therefore, time after time, it is a big success. And therefore, we are very happy to be main sponsor this year. There's also other good reasons for DESMI to be main sponsors this year. And one of the reasons is that we are right now in the middle of, I would say, a very significant retrofit project of ballast water management systems on as much as 29 vessels owned by DSMI ship owners. This is a huge deal for DESMI, and it's very important for us, and that's also why we really appreciate the opportunity to be here today with a big crowd of DESMI people and meet all the people that we work with day by day now. Retrofitting a ballast water management system is a big project, and we have in the seminar later today, we have a presentation from one of our customers, Sirius Shipping, who will give point of view from one of our customers how it is to work with DESMI during a retrofit project of ballast water management systems. Also, we also have other products in DESMI than ballast water management systems. Actually, our core product and what we have been working with DSMI ship owners also for a long time is our pump program. And we are a strong team of DESMI colleagues here during the full 2 days event. We have our booth down here in the end of Hall B, and we invite all of you to come and have a talk with us. We look forward to presenting our products, but we also very much look forward to hear from you what are your expectations and requirements for the future years, both in short term and long term. This is an important possibility for DESMI to understand where is the business headed and how can we support the ship owners in the right direction. Before I end this opening ceremony, I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker. The keynote speaker that we have invited has a special relationship to DESMI. Actually, he was the chairman of the board in DESMI Ocean Guard from 2011 to 2014, so we know him very well. But he's also, I would say, one of the very influential persons in the worldwide shipping community. He has held leading positions with the DNV, with the Maersk Maritime Technology, with the Royal Caribbean Cruises. He has been the director for the Center of Oil and Gas at the Technical University of Denmark. And today, and this is in this capacity that we have invited him today, he is the CEO of the A.P. Møller - Mærsk Center for Zero Carbon Shipping. So he will be able to give us today an insight to how shipping can contribute to solve one of the huge issues that we are facing globally. And that is, of course, global warming. So with these words, I would like to invite Bo Seop Simonsen from AP Møller Mærsk Center of Zero Carbon Shipping to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rasmus. Thanks for inviting me. It's really wonderful to be here today. To be here today on this beautiful, beautiful day on probably one of the most beautiful spaces on Earth. And it's a perfect setting to talk about what I'm invited to talk about here, namely the climate challenge that we're all facing. So I think we are at a very special point here, not only point in space, but also a point in time. Because we are at a point in time where many of us on individual level, with our dinner talks with our children and our parents and whatever we have, in our companies, when we strategize and when we make budgets, and also when we meet at communities like this. We are at a point in time where we're realizing that we have to do something about the climate issue. When IPCC launched its report last fall, they said, Mr. Guterres, who's the Secretary General of the UN, he said that this is now code red for humanity. Code red is a technical term, as many of you know. If you have code red in a hospital, it's a terrible emergency. It's a fire probably breaking out, and it's a terrible emergency. So code red in a hospital would be a disaster. Code red for humanity is a daunting challenge, and it's something beyond almost comprehensive how urgent and how important and how big this challenge is. So there is a growing realization that we have to do something about this challenge. But we are also at a point in time where there is actually time to do something about it. So we have time to actually find out what is it that we're going to do within our scope of influence to contribute to solving this problem. What is it that we can do in our sector to be a part of the solution to this challenge? And shipping has always been a part of the solution. In all major global issues, shipping is in there and is a part of the solution. Shipping provides local infrastructure, it provides global infrastructure, and shipping needs to be a part of this solution as well. Shipping is a part of all major supply chains, so you can't buy anything, you can't do anything without shipping somehow being a part of that one way or the other. So we have to do something about it, and there is time to do something about it. And that, of course, for all of us, for you, for me, on a personal level also means that we have to take in and think, what is it that we can do within our scope of influence to actually contribute to solving this? And the challenge is so big that many are sort of left perplexed in this because it's too big. It's just too difficult and it's too big to get your arms around. So how to become a part of this? I know for sure that most people want to be part of this. I know that 80% of countries have committed to actually solving the climate challenge. So you have huge amounts of people who want to be part of it, but it's a challenge because no country, no company can solve this alone, no matter how smart you are or how big you are. And this is actually the background for the Mærsk Mc-Kinney Møller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping. It was to say that even if there are a lot of strong countries out there, even if there are very smart individuals out there, even if there are huge companies out there that are trying to address this challenge, it's just too big for each of those to do it alone. So let us establish a collaboration platform where leaders across public sector, with maritime authorities, like we just heard here from the Swedish side, but maritime authorities from across the globe, and academia and industry players can come together and figure out how can we actually solve this challenge in time. And that is the Maersk Mc-Kinney Møller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping. And this is what I am heading. So let's have a look then at the challenge at hand, because what we are trying to do from the center side is basically to get our arms around, so what is this challenge when you look at it from the top? And first of all, we can say that the challenge on a timeline is such that we're looking at about 3 decades where we need to get significant reductions of climate emissions on a global scale, and then also for shipping. Because, like I just said, shipping provides support, infrastructure for the rest of the world to decarbonize. So when we look just at the big picture, we can say that we have approximately until 2050 to do some radical changes to the emissions also from shipping. And if you look at the graph to the right here, I don't know if you can see this, but then when we look at shipping over the next 3 decades, we can also argue quite robustly that shipping is probably going to grow over the next 3 decades. And so if we don't do anything dramatically about the way we power the ships, the way we run the ships, we can imagine that the emissions from shipping are actually going to go up over the next 3 decades. I'm an old guy, like Rasmus maybe alluded to. So my career started about 30 years ago. And at that time, we were doing a lot of great stuff to improve energy efficiency of ships. And we have been telling ourselves throughout my career that we have really been improving the technologies and the way we operate ships, and we have. So we have done tremendous improvement in shipping in terms of efficiencies. But the thing is just that when you look at the emissions from shipping since 1990, they have gone up by something like 50%. So even if we're doing great in what we're doing, the emissions are still, they keep going up, and the climate really doesn't care about all our great technologies and all our certificates and all our reporting and all that stuff. It just sees that the absolute levels of emissions keep going up and up and up. And this is what we have to take in. This is what we have to face. And this is why, when you look at the curves here, you can imagine that shipping emissions would continue to go up, but we actually have to break the curve now over the next 10 years and make some radical difference to make them start to go down on an absolute level. And how do we do that? The scale of this is enormous. So today the shipping industry burns around 300 million tons of fuel. That's about 1 gigaton of emissions, which is about 3% of the global emissions. So how can we reduce this amount of energy and fuel? So just to give you an idea here, if we were today to replace this fossil energy with renewable energy, we would need between 1,000 and 2,000 gigawatt of renewable energy to replace this. 1,000 to 2,000. And I'm from Denmark. We talk a lot about all our renewable energy in Denmark. We have about, let's say, 5 to 10 gigawatt of renewable energy in Denmark installed. So the scale of this is just massive. Let's say we just want to replace 5% of the fossil fuel, or 10% by 2030. This would mean, obviously, that we would need in the order of 100 gigawatt of renewable energy to power shipping by 2030. Turn that into new types of fuel and take them on board the ships. So you can see the scale and the timeline of this is such that we need to act on things that are completely different from what we're seeing today. So we really, really need some very strong moves to get this going. And then the question is, how do we catalyze, how do we get this transition going? Our vision in the Mærsk Mc-Kinney Møller Center is to decarbonize shipping by 2050. Some ship owners today, they say we should do it by 2040, some say 2060, but most actually don't have a specific target. And the reason for that is that it's too difficult for a ship owner today to see when can we do this and what are the implications for my company. So I'll get back to this in a minute. But for us to be concrete, we need to put a stick in the ground to start being concrete about the scale and the timeline. And this is why we're saying net zero by 2050. That's a very good vision. That's a very good target for the industry. It gives us a lot of understanding of the scale and the urgency needed. So what we're trying to do from our side is basically three things, and I'll explain a little bit about that, and then I'd like to invite all of you to engage in that if you think it's interesting. The first one is to set a course for the industry. And this is not something we're doing in a basement somewhere with 5 smart people. This is really an open process where we're inviting everybody in to provide input and guidance to how can and should this be done. It's really about explaining how can 100,000 ships, 300 million tons of fuel be replaced over 3 decades with green fuels and much higher levels of energy efficiency. How is that possible? How is it possible from a technical point of view? How is it possible from a country point of view? How is it possible from an investment and business point of view? So that's the first part. That narrative, that story, gives you a lot of understanding about what are the barriers and the bottlenecks and the risks in doing this. So why are investors not jumping to it and just getting it going? And we use that understanding then to set up a number of projects to remove those barriers. And that's the middle part here. So that is really about driving collaborative projects across the industry. And I'll give you some examples of that. Some of those projects are highly technical, some are about standards, and some, of course, are highly commercial, about getting business cases actually going, to get going. And then finally, the third one, and I think that's what many of you also realize, is that to get this truly going on a global scale, we need standards and we need regulation. And we need that urgently. So the third pillar that we're working on is, of course, to help establish those standards and to help get the regulation going, for example, with carbon pricing. So that's basically our working hypothesis, that these 3 areas will be needed, not just for us, but probably for all of you. You need to understand what is that narrative, the big picture, how is this going to play out. You need to understand what does it mean for my own services and products. And you need to understand what are the standards and regulations that we will all need to adhere to get this going. So for us, it has been extremely important from the beginning to get strong partners on board. So it doesn't become kind of an academic exercise that we do at home in the basement, but something that we're doing with the leaders of the industry that actually have set targets to decarbonize and leaders that want to invest to get this going. And this is why our partner portfolio is now with 23 leading companies that are all putting very significant resources into the center to actually work on those 3 areas that I just mentioned. And you can see the partner portfolio here. It is energy companies. It's both the classical, traditional oil and gas companies, But fortunately, we're also getting a lot of new players into the mix. So there are a lot of newcomers now to the energy side that are going to make a big difference in providing the fuels of the future. So it's on energy, it's on technology supplies, it's obviously on ship owners, and we have in here ship owners, and very strong ship owners within container, within tank, and within bulk. And now we also have cruise and passenger vessels. So this means that with these segments of shipping, we are covering something like 90% of the emissions from shipping. So if we can get those ship owners to really lean in and explain to us, how are you going to work with the cargo owners? How are you going to work with the technical part? How are you going to work with the financing and the regulation? Then we can actually create a very strong story about how is this transition going to play out. And finally, of course, also we have cargo owners with us here, both within container, tank, and bulk. So to get that whole new system going, we need these three elements of the value chain, and then we need, of course, regulators, financing, and insurance, and a lot of other players to help explain how is this going to work. And this is why we have on the right side here also a number of other partners with us working to explain this. So I mention this because if any of you are interested in working with us, either on this overall strategic level or on a project level, you're welcome to reach out. Then if you look at the timeline, so let's now, from the 2050 vision, zoom in on this decade, because this is really what is the most interesting part of this. It's very easy, in a way, to set a target or a vision in 2050, but if you don't pull it in and say, okay, so what does it mean to next year's budget? Actually, it doesn't really matter too much. But if you look at and count backwards from 2050 and say, then where should the industry be by 2030? You can say that if the whole industry has decarbonized by 2050 and realizing that ships live for 20, 25 years easily, then by 2030, we need to be in a place where the transition is actually scaling. So by 2030, we should be in a place, this is what we're saying here, that we have probably displaced something like 5 or 10% of the fossil fuel. So we can say now we are doing it, we've started to do it. When we build new ships, they can run on green fuels. We are retrofitting ships. We know that the green fuel supply chains are scaling. We know the standards, we know the regulations are in place. So the dream here is really that by 2030, the industry is in a place where we can say now we're in a robust track to decarbonization. So to be there in 2030, you could wonder, so where are we by 2026? So that is midway from today. And I think you can easily agree that by 2026, we then need to see these new systems in operation. So 4 years from now, we need to see bulk, tank, container, passenger, cruise running on green fuels, not on massive scale, but we need to start getting confidence that it is actually possible to do it, so we can take the learnings from that and understand what are the implications of that, commercial implications, regulatory and technical implications. And that, of course, means that now all of a sudden you can see only 4 years from now, we need to have all of those things in play, and it actually brings a huge state of urgency to our industry. So now we are really busy to get this going. And this, of course, means that our portfolio now in the center is to work with our leading partners to make sure that 4 years from now, we can see tank, bulk, container, cruise, ro-ro, passenger, etc., running on methanol, ammonia, green methane, biofuels, etc. And that is, of course, a huge task to get all of that going. So in order to really reach what you could call the inflection point of getting the transition going, it needs to be a good business case. At the point where this is a good business case, it'll be going robustly. And what does that take? It takes 5 areas to play together to actually make it a good business case. It takes policy and regulation, like we've discussed a lot, and a lot is going on in IMO and EU at the moment. It takes technology on board the ships, not only energy efficiency, but also new engine types, new propulsion types, etc. It takes new fuels. So we need to know that these new fuel types are coming at scale to our industry. It needs customers that are willing to pay a green premium to get shipping transportation. And today, if you ask your customers today, you'll probably find that that's a fairly small amount of your customers, but there are customers out there today that are actually willing to do it. And then it takes also finance to lean in, because we know that a lot is going on in the finance sector today. A lot of developments are going on to implement criteria for green finance. Rebates are being given for finance. So finance is going to play a big role in this as well. So these are the 5 levers that we have to bring together to really understand how does this become a good business case. So basically, the 4 areas that we need to work with now over the next years are these listed here. First of all, energy efficiency. Energy efficiency has brought the industry very far over the last 10 years, but there's still a huge potential for energy efficiency to help the shipping industry reduce its energy consumption even further. And energy efficiency is the most cost-effective way of reducing emissions. So energy efficiency still has a long way to go for the industry. And we believe it will be driven by digitalization, by more efficient systems on board, and also by policy and regulation. Then we know that the green fuels need to be made available for ships at scale. And a lot of development is going on now to make methanol, ammonia, and green methane and biofuel available at scale for the shipping industry. But I'll show you in a minute that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in order to make those energy pathways truly scalable. Then, of course, we need, like we said, the global regulation and the standards there. And a lot of work is ongoing in that, in IMO, for example. It's moving slowly, but I would say, though, that it is actually moving, and it is moving according to the strategy that was put in place in 2018. So I'm quite optimistic, actually, that IMO will progress, and next year will be extremely important for IMO. And then the last one I wanted to mention, and this is also for many of you in the room here, is the support and the action of the first movers and the fast followers. Because when you look at the whole transition, then it's actually rather complex to understand how 100,000 ships and all that fuel going to transition. But if you just look at where are the opportunities today, you will actually see that there are opportunities today to get going. And this is why, regardless how long it takes to get the global regulation and the standards in place, it's extremely important to support those energy companies, those technology providers, the ship owners, and the cargo owners that are willing today to come together and actually start to develop zero carbon shipping. And therefore, I would say from the center side, we have actually shifted a lot of focus from the long-term R&D to the shorter term to just help small ship owners, large ship owners to come together to actually get this going. So these are the 4 main areas to watch, and I would say to engage in, to be part of this transition. So when we look today at the shipping industry, you could ask then where are we today? How many are actually doing something about this today? So we made a study amongst tanker companies, container companies, and bulk companies to understand how progressive are these different segments in setting targets, in making strategies to get going. And you can see, if you can see the graph here, the picture is that we actually have within each of these segments a few companies that have set targets to go to zero around 2050. We have a few companies that have actually developed strategies to go to zero in 2050, or a little bit earlier or a little bit after. So there are a few companies out there that are actually doing it. But when you look at what are their emissions, so what is their share of the total emissions today, it's about 10 to 15% of the shipping emissions that are covered by ship owners that have set such targets. So you can say that, yes, we are actually on the move. Companies are doing something about it, but there's still a very long way to the point where you can say that now the whole shipping industry has agreed to go to zero in 2050. The energy companies have plans to deliver the fuels available, and the cargo owners have set targets to also buy zero carbon shipping services. We are in the beginning of that, but there's a long way to go. Then let me say a few words about what are the fuels of the future, because that's what everybody is asking us. So is it going to be this fuel or that fuel? And our answer to that is that it's going to most likely be multiple fuels in the future. It's hard to see that any single fuel will just win in the future fuel mix. So we're basically working with 20 different energy pathways and a limited number of fuels that can provide the scale needed for the shipping industry. And the 4 main fuel types are methanol, it is ammonia, it is green methane, and it is bio-oils, biofuels. Those 4 we believe will have a place in the future energy mix. It's impossible to say the relative scale and size of these, but we believe these 4 are robust ones in the future energy mix. And then you wonder, how do we actually produce those energy carriers and those fuels? And the pathways to producing the fuels are illustrated here, and of course you can go into our website and find explanations about how those fuels are going to be produced. There's a bio pathway at the bottom of the graph here, taking an outside in biomass as a primary energy source. At the top, there's an electrical energy pathways where you start with green electricity, and via electrolysis you turn that into green hydrogen. And then in the middle, there's the blue fuels where you start with a fossil gas, and then you turn that gas into a blue hydrogen. You take the CO2 out and store it, and then you have a blue hydrogen. So these are sort of the main energy pathways. Those pathways can provide the scale for shipping. And of course, then the big question when we look at what is actually going to happen is, what is the cost going to be of these fuels? What is the real climate impact of these different fuels? And when and where will they actually be delivered? So I don't want to go into detail with this at the moment. I just wanted to say that the 4 fuel types are all in progress now to be matured and to be basically prepared for the industry at scale. If you look at the landscape of these energy pathways and then look at how mature are those energy pathways, you can say that all of them have a challenge on the scalability at this point in time. When you look at 2030, we believe that actually the industry can get access to the needed amount of fuel. So scale is an issue. A lot of investments need to be done, but it's not impossible to do it. So the scale is actually okay for 2030. Then when you look into the maturity of those pathways, you can see on the chart here that on the ammonia pathways, there are some red areas on the roadways, and that is mainly because of safety issues related to ammonia. So there's some very important work that needs to be done to assure that safety can be maintained. Methanol is today available for shipping, not a lot of green methanol, but ships are running on methanol today. So from a technical point of view, it is a proven technology. But for methanol to be truly scalable in the future, we need to make sure that we can get what we call biogenic carbon to produce the methanol. So there are some elements in methanol, but methanol is definitely a possible path today. And this is, of course, why you see ships running on methanol today. This is why Maersk, and now recently CMA also announced that they will run their ships on methanol. So methanol is definitely an interesting pathway in here. And then, of course, methane is an interesting one too. Both because biogas is produced at scale today, so you can say that part is already a proven technology, but also because a lot of ships are being produced today with dual fuel LNG capability. So a lot of ships are actually being put into service today that could run on green methane in the future, just using the ship as it is. So you can see this map here provides a nice overview of the barriers and the bottlenecks in this system, and it provides, of course, us a nice framework for setting in motion projects together with the ecosystem to remove these barriers in the system. Then when we look at how much carbon pricing, because a lot of people are asking, so what is actually the cost implication? So we've done some studies to understand what level of carbon pricing would actually be needed to get this transition going. And we've done these studies together with all our partners. So we have fairly robust understanding about the cost of fuels, the implications for the ship owner in using these fuels, so how much will your cost of shipping go up for the green fuels, and therefore also what is the gap to running your ship on fossil fuel, and therefore also how much carbon pricing will be needed to make the green ship the preferred choice for the investor. And we believe today that the needed carbon, if you were looking at just a flat rate of carbon pricing, you would need something like in the order of $200 per ton of CO2, which translates into something like $700 dollars per ton of fuel. It's in that order of magnitude, which I think probably comes as no surprise to any of you, because it just means that the green fuels are typically 2 to 3 times more expensive than the fossil fuels. So that's kind of a no-brainer that this level of carbon pricing would do it. But the thing is, and these are the discussions that are being had in IMO now, is that if you design a smarter carbon pricing system, you can do with much lower levels of carbon pricing. Because if you design a system where the carbon levy in the beginning are used to support the first movers, then in the beginning you would have 99% of the shipping industry paying a levy on their fossil fuel, and this 99% would be supporting the 1% that are actually buying the green fuels. And this trick, of course, means that then instead of $200 a ton, you could do with probably $30 or $50 a ton. And then as the cost curve comes down for production of the green fuels, the scale of use of green fuel goes up, and you would probably need to increase the carbon pricing, but not to $200 or $300 a ton. So there are some very interesting opportunities in designing carbon pricing mechanisms that will get this transition going at much lower cost levels than just $200 or $300 a ton. So then finally, just to bring this to a conclusion, I would like to underline the importance of the first movers. And this is why from the center side, we have put a lot of emphasis now on helping the first movers to get going. Clearly, some of the big companies out there, like the Total and the BP and the Maersk and the Hapag-Lloyd and the MAN and those, they can get going basically without a center like ours. But a lot of smaller players, smaller ship owners, find it much more difficult to actually get going. And this is why from the center side that we are now establishing a number of projects. We call them green corridors, where we are inviting countries and ports and energy producers in. We are inviting ship owners in. We are inviting technology providers in. We are inviting cargo owners in. We are inviting maritime authorities in. So we are inviting in the whole value chain to say, how can we actually get started with delivering and providing zero carbon shipping services? We're doing this in Northern Europe now, and we have a very interesting project where we are establishing now this green corridor thinking in Northern Europe, all the way from Tallinn, Gdansk, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and down to Hamburg and Rotterdam, and probably also tying in UK. So we'd like to see a network of ports that can provide green fuels to ships, and we'd like to actually start seeing a network of shipping activities in that Northern European region. We're doing the same with Chile and South America now to look at opportunities there because they have a lot of renewable energy, shipping activities, and a lot of mining and agriculture products that need to also be transported on zero carbon services. So altogether, this is for me to say at the end that I am very hopeful that the transition is possible in the long run. We can do it. We can get the scale needed. We can get the technologies needed. We can get the regulation in place that will actually pull the entire industry along without excessive costs to shipping. So we can do it in the long run. And I also strongly believe that we will see it happening now over the next 10 years. You will see energy companies starting to produce green fuels at scale. You will see ship owning companies starting to buy the ships. This is already happening today, and starting to running their ships on the green fuels. You will see cargo owners that are starting to pay a small green premium for the shipping services to get going. So we will actually, over the next 5 years, start to see this happening, and then we will use this as a catalyzing effect to spread the gospel, spread the good news, and use the technical and the economic information from those activities to get the right regulation in place, to get the right standards in place, to make this scalable for the entire industry. So I think that concludes my talk. I think it's the right thing to do. We can do it, and I really believe also, seeing the leadership in the industry, that we will also do it. So thank you all for your attention. Thank you.